All right, so thrilled to be here. My name is Bronwyn Harris. I am Chief Transformation Officer at Care Evolution, and Garrett is software architect here. Just a little bit of my timeline so that you know about my experience with wearables and the different things that I have done. I'm trained as a biomedical engineer before deciding to take the 10-year-long detour in medical school and then doing pediatrics residency and cardiology fellowship. Then I jumped from that. I do still continue to practice part-time. I see pediatric cardiology patients a half day a week at Stanford, but then work full-time in the digital health space for the last decade. I started my own company, 2EO Health, that was using off-the-shelf sleep sensors. At the time, wearable data didn't actually have all of the sleep data that it does now. We created a digital asthma program around that. Then I was at Apple, where I got to actually do the next version of that asthma program. And that's when I first was working with Care Evolution and first got to meet Garrett. We use the MyDataHelps platform, and Care Evolution was our software vendor for that asthma digital study. I also got to work on individual features on the Apple Watch, and so learned a lot about that. Carbon Health, I worked on a lot of different patient-facing programs, helped to lead a remote patient monitoring hypertension program, a virtual diabetes program, a mental health program, and then also helped to put together a virtual first primary care program. I'm then thrilled now to be here at Care Evolution and talking to you today about wearables. All right, so why? Why might you want to use wearables in research? And being here, I bet that you likely have some ideas, but still want to talk about it. There might be things that you haven't even thought of. And before I start with the why, I do just want to, set the stage of the fact that wearables are out there. So this is not, none of this data is talking about its use in research. It's talking about its use as individuals purchasing and using these wearables. So a lot of different stats out there, but pretty consistently over 20% of adults worldwide own a wearable. Some of the stats I see that for the US, even potentially up to 40%. And then of those smartwatch users, through survey response, the majority of them are reporting that they regularly utilize the health and fitness features. And for many of them, that's actually the reason why they purchase it. And looking at the timeline, you can see, we're not at the beginning of the wearable journey. We really are at this big, kind of uptick in the use of it. So Fitbit coming out in 2009, but still even 4 years after that, there's only, just over 1 million sold. Apple Watch first came out in 2015 and Samsung in 2018. And then estimated that last year there's 184 million smartwatches sold worldwide. So wearables are out there, whether you're using it in your research or not, many of your participants likely have one on their wrist. And when you think about how studies work today, they typically are the top part of this figure, this episodic. Maybe a patient needs to come in, they do consent, maybe there's, something that has to be done in clinic, some assessments, and then there's another period in time they have to come back. And, maybe there's some phone calls or some, intermittent touch bases, but it's really intermittent, potentially weeks, months, or even years in between data points. And a wearable, as long as they're wearing it every day, you're getting that continuous data, not even just, once a day, that it's many times, minutes or multiple readings a minute. So you can see how valuable that can be and how different it is. And so they thought of, okay, well, what are the reasons of using the wearables? I put it in 4 different broad buckets, and these buckets absolutely overlap. You may want to do all of them or 2 of them. The first is data collection. So wanting to actually have that data that you can obtain from the wearable. Another is engagement. So whether or not you're caring specifically about that data, you need the patient to engage with whatever study you're doing, whether it's longitudinal collecting surveys. You don't want them to sign up and then completely forget about and drop off. Another is personalization. So, what can you learn about this participant, whether it's to then help serve a survey at a specific point in time that they're more likely to fill it out? Is it to tailor a message so it feels a lot more personal? They're more likely to do what is being requested of them. And then it may be that you actually want them to do an intervention. Intervention could be going for a walk that day. Intervention could be doing a specific log, taking a medication. And so digging in a little bit deeper on the data collection, I'd put 2 broad categories of that. So one would be, you might want to get that same data that you currently are getting in person. So someone may be coming into clinic and they may be getting a blood pressure reading and a resting heart rate. Well, wouldn't that be great if that person doesn't have to come into clinic at all, and they can get that, not only get that resting heart rate at home, but they could actually get that on a daily basis, or even more, multiple times a day. Now, it may be that you want to supplement, or maybe you're replacing. They never have to come into clinic. Maybe you're doing some sort of reading with ECG. Maybe you're looking at long QT, and you have them come into clinic once a month and you do that assessment. Now that's a 12 lead. The smartwatches, they can't do a 12 lead, but they can do, some of them, a 1 lead ECG. So maybe you still want them to come into clinic, but maybe once a week you have them do the 1 lead ECG at home. And then it may be that you're doing different data types, something that you weren't collecting in the first place. And it could be that that's of primary interest. Like you are wanting to collect heart rate throughout the day and you're looking at correlations with something else. It may be exploratory, that you have this cohort and you want to look at these different parameters and see, is there something that could be predictive? You might want to identify a confounder. So try to see that if, with some medication or some treatment, if someone isn't sleeping as well or they have less sleep, how does that impact it? So a lot of different reasons that you might want that different data type. Engagement, you can have engagement that actually is, unrelated to the data you're collecting or even to what you're trying to do, but maybe that you are a registry and you want to get surveys every month on individuals, and it's a lot. You're asking a lot of that individual to log all of that information and give it to you. There's the ability with wearables to give something back. So one is, we call it return of information, but showing them what their wearable is. So it's, allowing them to see, and we can have it in nice figures and trends. So it becomes, the app is a place that they actually look at their own trends or get that information. Sometimes you will even do goals do a goal so that the patient is then driving to, okay, well, I want to complete this activity or meet this certain thing, even if it's not that the study or the registry is trying to do an actual intervention, but it brings them into the experience, keeps them engaged. And then it may be that engagement is actually the intervention. So the asthma tool that I had mentioned that I worked on earlier, a lot of that is using wearable data to actually have timely prompts. And the intervention is having someone reflect on how they're feeling at the time, identifying their own asthma control and identifying triggers. And then you also could tailor prompts. Maybe their activity has decreased. And so you can give a tailored message that is based on that. Feels very personal and meaningful to the individual. So tons and tons, thousands of studies have been done with wearables. So not trying to, go and show all of that, but just thought I'd show 2 quick examples with links here. So if you want to read more about them later, you can. This is the DETECT study. So this was back during COVID. Enrolled almost 40,000 adults in the US, which I still find amazing. These were individuals who had their own smartwatch. So it was what we call a BYOD, bring your own device. The study did not supply smartwatches. And then they are wanting them to complete survey questions with symptoms and their COVID test results. And you can see from the app image here, there is this return of information. So there's really interesting information that the patient participant is able to see in that. And this was then just a data collection and patient engagement. And then a lot of many papers have come out of this looking at predictions of COVID-19 from these self-reported symptoms and the sensor data. Many of you have likely heard of the Framingham heart study, started in 1948, wanting to look at the common factors and characteristics that contribute to cardiovascular disease. So I have over 5,000 patients they had recruited and then have been followed longitudinally. They return and do every 2 years very detailed medical history, physical exam, laboratory tests. So then they have now added on this electronic Framingham heart study where they're able to collect digital data in addition to that. And so with that, a lot of really interesting information that they can look and see, relations based on physical activity or different daily habits and how that's contributed and, is additive to all of the other information they're already collecting. And I think really important, we're talking about digital, we're talking about wearables to address social inequalities and talk about that. And there has been a lot of talk in the past of it being a digital divide. So, are we leaving further behind those who already have disparities in their care and lower socioeconomic? And I think a really positive is I think the tides have changed in that, and digital actually now can be a bridge. There are high rates of smartphone ownership. So these figures, and even these figures are old. This was 2018. So, I would expect it to be even higher now. But even then, Medicaid members, 86% had smartphones. Rates of wearables are lower, just around 30%. And so that's something to consider if you're doing a digital intervention that requires a wearable in a Medicaid population. You should presume that you would need to provide a wearable for them. But absolutely, this is a way to help meet people where they are, have them, transportation may be an issue, getting care. So not shying away from providing these types of digital interventions. There's similar use of technology for health purposes amongst all of these groups, including Medicaid. So there's a willingness and understanding of using these tools. All right, so what? So data types. I love this figure just to show, wow, there's a ton of different data. And this is talking about all different digital data, but we can learn a lot about an individual from this type of data. Now, for the sake of focus in this webinar, really focusing in on the smartwatch wearables, figure here showing a lot of the common parameters, but also calling out, hey, you actually can get some parameters from the smartphone. So for example, step count, when the phone is in your pocket, it can get the step count, you can get some activity measures. And then of course there are the medical devices, most common of which blood pressure and continuous glucose monitor. So, tons and tons of data that you can get. But for today, we're just focusing on the wearable. These I'd say are the most common and pretty consistent across the different wearable types. I'll highlight a few differences when I go through the primary ones. I want to take just 1 minute, not gonna, go back in time and give everyone a lecture on this stuff, but I think important for the physicians who are here and researchers of understanding where this is. I think many people think, okay, well, there's these hospital grade devices I'm used to, the pulse ox, all of the monitors in the hospital, and then these, commercial wearables are in this whole other category. I think the take home point here is it's based on the same principles. So the functionality of it is using PPG. That's the same as what's on, the finger probe that you're taking care of all the patients in the hospital. The principles of it, you can see from this figure, it's a light source goes through your tissue. There's absorption. There's a detector on the other side when it's pulse ox. When this figure here, this A, and the same as on the wrist, it's using reflectance. And then with every heartbeat, you can see there's this pulsatile flow. And so that's the extra blood with every heartbeat. That's the only thing that should be changing. And so when you're getting a clean signal, it's very accurate, right? It's seeing with every heartbeat what's going on. Now, absolutely, you can imagine, right? That pulsatile flow, if your arm, you're running really fast, a lot of activity, there are confounders and there's things where, okay, noise can factor into it. Same as you see, in the hospital, there are challenges to that. But when you're getting a really clean signal, it's very accurate. You can see here on the right is showing the ECG versus this PPG signal. You don't need to know all the details of it, but just know it works the same principle as the SpO2 that you're using in the hospital. All right, so accuracy. Of course, we're going to talk about accuracy. I think a few things to remember is always think about the use case and the scenario that you're designing the study for, or that you think eventually would be used. And typically, these are patients who are at home and generally well. There certainly are some other scenarios, but just, that's the usual case. What accuracy do you usually expect in the hospital setting? And then think about, are your expectations different out of the hospital? If they aren't, should they be? And then of course, it's scenario by scenario, right? Are you thinking about a use case where a change in heart rate, you remind them to do a breathing exercise for a meditation? Or is it something where you're thinking that you might combine all these signals and tell them to take a medication they wouldn't have, right? Those are very different use cases, and the risk benefits are different. So you need to think about those all individually. I'm going to go through a few quick studies that I think are great showing accuracy, but the takeaway isn't that these studies are the end all be all, but just there has been a lot of work done on the accuracy of these parameters. And so if there's something particular that you're wanting to look at, go to PubMed, look through and find something that tells you what are the limitations of that, because everything does have limitations. So this is my favorite one for heart rate, because they compared multiple different commercial devices and research grade, and pretty robust. 53 participants went through full protocol. It unfortunately now is getting outdated because it was in 2020 and performed before that, so the versions are a bit older. But the key findings from this one was, this is heart rate only, but the research grade wearables were actually less accurate than the consumer grade. Seeing a lot of work has been done on the algorithms for these commercial grades. So they were quite accurate, more so than the research grade. At rest, which makes sense, right? There's less noise and confounders with that. They were more accurate than with physical activity. And the mean absolute error while at rest was on average 7 beats per minute. And as a pediatric cardiologist, for me, if I see a patient and their heart rate is 64 versus 71, I don't get excited about that. It's not going to change what I do of that. So yes, there is certainly, some error. I wouldn't, absolutely guarantee that's exactly what the number says, but overall, it's in the right zones. This one is respiratory rate. I couldn't find one that compared across many different ones like that heart rate did. But a really robust study. It was 195 patients compared with a gold standard overnight sleep study. This was looking at the Samsung Galaxy Watch. And here the root mean squared error overnight was just 1 breath per minute, which I don't know, often it feels like a lot of those respiratory rates are estimated. You typically aren't even counting for a whole minute. So difference between a 12 and a 13 is no big deal at all. Accuracy was lower with patients with sleep apnea, which makes sense with the disordered breathing, but so something to be aware of. If you have a patient population with severe sleep apnea, you need to recognize the accuracy is different there. This one is looking at sleep time. This compared Aura, Fitbit, and Apple. And important in this that, all of the parameters are not equal. So total sleep time is pretty good. Sleep latency, very good. But then looking at the specific sleep levels, light versus deep, REM, not so good. Again, actually, I think not surprising. You don't have EEG. You really aren't getting that level of detail, but so important to know and understand the, strengths and weaknesses of each of these. And then as you're selecting devices, really think about what parameters you want to collect and then for what purpose. Sometimes it seems, oh, we should just get everything, the more the better. There's a lot that you need to do. It can be challenging to have more than you really need. But so what are you collecting for what purpose? Which devices can collect that? Understand the accuracy and limitations. Budget factors in, your population size, knowing about your population, like do you think they will have wearables already? And that then factors into this BYOD. Do you have them just use their own wearables? Are you providing devices? Maybe a combination, you give out, a certain number and then others can still join after. And if you are providing, there's logistics of distribution for that. And so I've mentioned this a few times now, this BYOD, definitely cheaper. You're not having to provide it, logistically simpler. You could allow multiple different devices, although, sometimes the data that outputs from them are, is a little different. There is inherent bias because those then are individuals who already have the device or the ability to purchase it. If you're giving the device, that can actually act as an incentive to sign up. And if they complete a certain number of tasks, they can earn the right to do that. You can have more generalizable results. Typically, you're having to just choose and only support one device. And there are certainly logistical challenges to distributing them. And maybe someone has a different wearable and they don't want the one, that you're providing. So that actually might exclude some people or keep them from wanting to sign up. So this is not studies, but just to get a survey of what are the top watch brands that people are purchasing out there. Apple Watch, current leader. Google and Fitbit now combined. There's multiple ones of those, but all under the Google umbrella. Samsung and Garmin. So real quick, tons of detail in here. You can refer back to it. I'm not going to talk about all of these things, although I would also say make sure you go to the website. If you're about to do a study on a wearable and deciding, make sure you look and have the most up to date. Occasionally these things change. Usually it's to add more, although occasionally like in with Apple Watch, the SpO2 has been removed. So if that's a key part of your study, you would not want to use that, and make sure that you're up to date on that. A few things to highlight here, the Google and the Fitbit. So the Fitbit Inspire 3 here at $99, this is the cheapest of these ones that I'm showing. So, really affordable for a study. That does not have ECG, which many studies, that doesn't matter. It has all the heart rate stuff. And then battery life for all of these important, just to highlight, very big difference from the Pixel, which is more expensive too, but at 24 hours, and the Inspire at 10 days. Here, the Apple Watch, a key thing here, this is iOS only, so there's not ability to use Android with that. And then also the app has to be downloaded for the data transferring, and you'll see that in the demo with Garrett, that for Fitbit or Garmin, that isn't the case. You actually could have someone just using the web, but for Apple Watch, they have to download the app. Battery life is 18 hours, which can be a bit of a challenge, especially if you're trying to have someone sleep with the watch. Although that being said, if you remember, it is the most popular one out there. So certainly there are people out there willing to, and wanting to use it. The Garmin, long battery life, 11 days. It's really popular for the continuous daytime heart rate variability that it has. So really detailed data on that is often a reason it's chosen for studies. Okay, all right. Now I think, to the fun part, the how. We have Garrett here, 2 decades worth of experience in building health software. Although, let me just say, everything that he's doing today, you can do. I can do too, but he does it much better, more polished. So, so thrilled that he can walk us all through it. But everything that he's going to show you is no code. He and many others at Carevolution has done the work behind the scenes so that no code is needed at this point. So yeah, this is the, kind of roadmap that he's going to walk through. Get your timer started. He's going to do all of this in less than 30 minutes. No pressure, Garrett. I hope the power and internet hasn't gone out. But yeah, he's already in the MyDataHelps platform. So you will set up less than 5 minutes, register. It's free to create an account. He's going to create a new project, show you how easy it is to enable wearable collection, show you how to create this return of information for patients, a quick survey creation, enroll a first participant. Of course, you would test and, do all of that good stuff first, but we're going to, speed through that part for this demo and set up data exports. All right, Garrett, I'm going to stop sharing.
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Let me just share my screen here so we can see. Please let me know. Are you seeing?
Yes.
Designer. Okay.
Yeah.
So
looks good.
As Bronwyn stated, this is essentially the landing page you would come to after you first created an account and you've created your first organization. So there's about 5 minutes of email registration and creating naming an organization before you get to this point. Once you land here, we have some project templates. We're going to start with a blank project today, just to show for our purposes, sort of bare bones. But if, for example, you had a Fitbit only study, there are other templates that already have a bit more built out infrastructure in place, schedules, notifications, reminders, some surveys and things like that you can take advantage of right off the bat. This can all, of course, be created from a blank project, but there are just some templates we have out of the box that will allow you to kind of have some of the other configurations set up. But today's purpose is to show just how simple it is to start from scratch and essentially take live a study that collects some wearable data. Today we're going to focus on Apple Health and Fitbit. There are other connection capabilities, a little bit of Google Fit, which is being sort of sunset into a new thing, Garmin, as Bronwyn mentioned, and Omron for things like cuffs and stuff like that. But today's focus will be on just steps and heart rate from Apple Health and Fitbit. Is kind of what we're going to be looking at. So we're going to start with a blank project. We're going to use this template. We'll create a new project, my wearable project. I've created it. We'll come in here. There's a bunch of different settings, and for the purposes of this webinar and demo, we're not going to get into detail of all the available configuration options here. There's help guides and some other things that can be used to learn a bit more about this whole tool if you'd like to. But the first thing we're going to do is just, since this is a wearable focused demonstration, we're going to jump down to the wearable data and show how we would enable that for our new project. In this case, these are the available sources of sensor and EHR data at this time. We're going to go into Apple Health and we're going to turn on a few of these or a couple of these. for this demonstration, hourly steps, and we're going to get resting heart rate. So there are obviously many other steps, different types of data types within each of these categories. But as Bronwyn pointed out, you don't always want to ask for all of them. I mean, you might need all of them, but just note that participants have to agree to this. So they will get prompted to, and if you're asking for, hundreds of data types, they may be reluctant versus if there's specific targeted ones that you're actually interested in. It's nice sometimes to get the other data, but, ideally we at least get them consenting and enrolled. So we're also going to enable Fitbit integration, which allows people to essentially sign into their Fitbit account to link it with the MyDataHelps system so that we can pull the data from Fitbit directly. Apple Health is, as Bronwyn pointed out, through the intermediary of the iPhones. You have to have your iPhone to get your Apple Health data. So like your watch and stuff like that will come through Apple Health. We're going to save the sensor data. Once we've saved that, I suppose we can, well, we'll do some return of information. So we discussed having the ability to show participants some of the data that they're getting from their devices that we're receiving. So what we're going to do here is create a new tab for them. We're called a My Data tab, and we're going to use a tool that Carevolution created called View Builder, which is free to use. You don't even have to have an account. You can just visit viewbuilder.carevolutionapps.com, and you can create a view that can be published and used within the MyDataHelps Designer tool. So we're just going to do a simple one. We'll put some text at the top with a title. There's some markup in some of the text, so you can do adjustments like that. We're going to do a couple of these cards just to organize some widgets. Part of our data visualization section has these things called daily data charts. So since we picked steps, we're going to come in here and get the step data coming in. We're going to show it a week at a time. We're going to start the week 6 days ago, and we should be good with that one. And then we'll do another one for resting heart
And Garrett,
rate.
I'm going to jump in. I mean, and just point out, he's making it look so easy, and it is. And the point is, right, there's all of the code is happening behind it, but yeah, he's literally a drop down. Do I want a bar graph? Do I want a line graph? Just picking which of the data
There's
types.
bar, line, area.
Yeah,
You can do the different types of graphs.
all of it's set up,
data.
and it's literally click, drag and drop. Really awesome for those of you who have struggled of designing and then having built an app and all of the challenges. This is we'll be ready to go, and you make these choices.
And so I'm just going to call this the My Data view. Yeah, and there's other, you can adjust colors and things like that too. We're not going to get into that for this demonstration, but essentially we've wired this up to show us the past 6 days worth of steps on a daily basis, and also your resting heart rate for those. We're using combined data sources, which means it will pull from, if you have Apple Health and Fitbit, it'll pull across a unified provider of that data. So regardless of which type of device it comes in on, it'll show up in these charts. All we have to do here is publish this, which will generate a URL for us. This is the publishing URL, and then there's a return to edit URL. We're just going to copy the publishing URL, go back to our application layout for our project. We're going to add a new tab. We're going to call this tab My Data. We'll give it a dashboard icon. It's going to be a custom view made with View Builder. So we just paste that URL in here. And in the future, if we want to re-edit that, we can now just click the edit button. It'll take us to View Builder with that view in place so we can edit it. I'm just going to verify that these other settings are good. Give it a unique key of My Data. It's supported on platforms of iOS, Android, and web at this point. You can also limit that if you only want the tab to show up for certain environments, something for web only or something for Android only or iOS. And you can also make it visible to certain segments within MyDataHelps Designer. We're just going to do all participants. We want everybody to get the same thing. And if you did want to, you can assign a badge source so that this tab shows a number at the bottom when there's something to see there. But typically that would be more for like a task tab or things like that. So we're going to say done here. We have the new tab. We'll make it the second tab, and we're going to save those.
And Garrett, can I just comment too? So you see the home and the tasks, those are a pre-made. You can do the same thing that Garrett went through if you wanted to do a custom view builder, you wanted it to be a little bit different or a lot different.
That's right.
But so those ones, he didn't secretly do anything before. Those are the, standard, you go in, you'll have that. but then you
Yes.
have the ability to make changes.
Yeah, we could essentially replace it. We could go build our own home view with the widgets we want, and we could, swap this one out. We could do a similar thing for tasks. These two are just out of the box tasks and home views that happen to be there to start the project, but we can remove those or make new ones or edit those kind of things. So now that we have the application layout in place, I think one more thing I'll do before I enroll a participant is just go create like a welcome survey, just to kind of show that how simple that is to
And you'll see there's one survey already there, and that's standard. You can obviously delete it if you don't want it, but a standard consent one, and so that comes up with a new project.
Yeah, you get the standard you get standard consent survey. You also get a standard invitation notification. We're not going to use that because we're just going to use the QR code today for our enrollment. But yeah, there's a couple of building blocks that get put in place automatically. Just want this instruction step. And then maybe we'll just like ask them their mood or something. Say, how are you today? This could be any number of questions you might want to provide them in a baseline survey about any number of things. We're going to publish that survey. We'll then go back to our project. And in order to deliver that upon enrollment, there's a feature called schedules. We're just going to go add about the simplest one you can, which is a on enrollment survey or on enrollment schedule. Sorry. We're just going to name it the welcome survey. And all we want it to do is when somebody enrolls, we want it to deliver the welcome survey with a 2-week due date. And that schedule is now created. So at this point, we've set up essentially everything we need to gather data from participants and to let them view the return of results and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go to our enrollment settings, and I'm going to actually switch over to the phone, and we're going to go through what the participant would see now as part of their enrollment. So enrollment settings has a QR code for joining. There's also links, and we can do invitations and things like that. But for this purpose, we'll just do the QR code scan. So scan the QR code. This will take us to a web-based enrollment where we can create an account. So in this case, I'll create.
And this web-based, so he did it with QR code. If you were sending invitations, say over email, and you click on it, you can go right into the browser on the computer and be able to sign up. And so goal being to make registration as easy as possible. Often people don't want to download an app initially. And actually, depending on whether you're using, Fitbit or Apple Health, you might not even need them to download an app. There's, kind of pros and cons, but either way, we want this onboarding as easy as possible. So you can just go and create this, and then you'll see that there are prompts to download the app if that's what you're wanting for your specific study.
Right. And so this is just the MyDataHelps privacy policy agreement for when they're creating a new account. This orange banner at the bottom will not normally be there once you've gone to production. This is because our new project is still in development mode. And it's just warning folks that, hey, this is still development, join at your own risk. This is part of the consent that was created. We didn't actually look at the content of that consent survey, but this is the part of the blank consent. So you can modify what this content is, but we're just going to go through that consent to get enrolled in the study. Put some fake values in here. Garrett demo, pick a birth date here somewhere, 70s. Agree.
And same with these consents, based on your study, your IRB, if you need the full name, if you need a full signature, all of that's customizable.
Yeah, if you're okay with them just hitting agree, you can do that. If you need them to sign and all that other kind of stuff, you can do those. So at this point, because we're on web, it's actually going to prompt us at the top to try to suggest we download the app. It also shows us our available tasks, which include that welcome survey that we did upon enrollment. And there's a little device connection manager area here that talks about connecting Fitbit or downloading MyDataHelps in order to use Apple Health. So we're going to just click on the App Store version. It's going to take us to the App Store for MyDataHelps, and we're going to tell it we want to install that app. And while that's kind of taking its time and doing what it does, I'm going to go ahead and go back here and show, like, if they were on the web and they just want to, they can do the connection to Fitbit. And so they should be able to come in here. Let's see. Oops.
And this
Sorry.
is, if you remember, as we went through the different ones. So Fitbit has an actual thing that you log into, and so it's going to cloud. And so therefore, he's able to log into Fitbit and it can work whether it's web or app. Well, that's not the case for anything going through Apple Health, including the Apple Watch.
Yeah, unfortunately, it cached my Fitbit login, so when I connected, it just connected. There was one screen there that you would normally have seen. It's an OAuth flow. So when you authenticate, you would have received the login screen for Fitbit. It would have you authenticate, and when you do, it'll just say MyDataHelps would like to have your data, and it gives you a few check boxes for sharing some or all of your data. And then when you approve that, you land back here, and you'll see the status update to Fitbit is downloading your data. And I'm going to see if the app is downloaded at this point.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, I'll answer the question. And that patient has to get the app on their phone. So that's up to you when you set up the study, and a little bit up to you of what wearable are you using. So for example, if you are using Fitbit, you can get the data by them signing into the account. Like what Garrett just did, well, that was on his phone. It's web-based. He's downloading the app now. And was able to connect Fitbit. You can get the data. Now, I will say, right, you can't obviously do app notifications. You can do text and email from that, but some individuals will choose to do a study completely appless. But yes, if you want to use Apple Watch or anything with Apple Health, they have to download the app.
Yeah, to see here, I went back to the web, so it was still downloading the app, so I just went back to the web, and because we had connected Fitbit already, it's already pulling that data. And when I went to the My Data tab that we had created in View Builder, it's already pulling some of the Fitbit data. So even without the app fully installed, you can do the Fitbit and things like Garmin integrations you can do with web only. We're going to finish installing the app here, and then it will also synchronize our Apple Watch and Apple Health data up to it.
Yeah, if you notice, right, like, so there's the website listed at the bottom. There are the tabs. So it's that nice experience. It feels like you're in an app, but you didn't have to download an app. So a lot of different functionality and choices that you have with this. And then again, it's what you need, what your patient population is, and, figuring out what's best for all that. And it can be depending, say it is with, Fitbit, you have that option. You could also give participants the option. Some might prefer to have the app, some might not. And yes, so with a Fitbit study, the study team and patient, they can access through web, and they can see the data. The data is shared. So basically, Fitbit, the data is then going to the Fitbit cloud, and then that can be shared with without needing the app interface in between. Meanwhile, for something like Apple Health, the Health Kit, it actually is then going to your phone. So, part of Apple's privacy, or the way they're set, they wanted it purposely set up of the data from the watch is not going, to some intermediary cloud. But so that, for better or worse, means that there has to be an app to share it.
Yep. Yeah, sorry, I typed the wrong name when I was registering my email, so I had to go check and see what it was. Oh, so now that we're in the app, the first thing it's going to do is ask us, is it okay if we send you notifications? Because obviously it's, the new app on the device. The other thing is, because we had Health Kit, Apple Health EHR data that we wanted to share, that we had configured here in the EHR sensor data settings, Apple Health is going to prompt on the device. So that's what you're seeing here. Now it will, Apple Health has certain rules about when it asks and when it doesn't ask. So if the person already has the app or is already part of a study and they've already answered this question, it won't re-ask them again. But for any data types that they didn't yet get asked, it will ask them if they want to share those. So in this case, it asks us for steps and resting heart rate, because those are the two that we enabled. We're going to say allow. And then we're going to see a screen that's very similar to the web one that we had over here. Let me get back out of the account. So this is the web version, but we're also in on the mobile app, which is this one. And we just don't have the prompt at the top for downloading the app. And also for Apple Health, there's some information provided here that, because they don't allow us to reprompt often, this kind of gives instructions on, hey, if you did want to share some more data or adjust those settings, here's how you do so. For Apple Health and Fitbit, of course, it shows it's connected. They still have their survey here. And if we go to the My Data tab, we're going to see the data from Fitbit. And if it's got synchronized by now, yeah, we even pulled some from Apple Health too, because I know that some of the HR was a little different than that for when it was just Fitbit. So in this case, we're having Fitbit and Apple Health data pulling in, from, in my case, from an Apple Watch and from a Fitbit. And then also, if people have a greater history of data than me from the last couple of days, Fitbit will pull like a year's worth of data when you first connect it. I believe Apple Health pulls around 7. So if they have, they'll get like a week's worth of their data brought in when they first join up, like from their Apple Watch or from Fitbit. They'll get a bit of history as well. So they can start seeing their older data right away. Once this data is coming in from this is obviously the participant version or view of it. From a coordinator view, let's see if I can minimize this out of the way a little bit. You can see some of that data by coming into their, sorry, let me back that up. You can come into the participant viewer and you click on the participant and you'll see, you land on their little support dashboard, but if you click over into their Apple Health tab, you'll see the data that's been coming in from Apple Health. So you can review it here. You can also click on Fitbit and review the data that's been coming in from Fitbit for that person. Likewise.
And so that, whether or not they downloaded the app, you would be able to see it.
Right. The Fitbit data would be here even before we downloaded the app. Yeah. The Apple Health data wouldn't have showed up until we gave it permission to share. And then it would have pulled that in. The other thing I'll do here real quick is, let me pull up the phone again. I'll just go ahead and complete that little welcome survey that we had and show you where that lands back in there. Now they've completed that, all their tasks are complete. We can see that over here as well, that it's done. And if we come back in here, we can look at their survey results, and they have the welcome survey. Minimize this other thing out of the way. Their original consent that they completed, as well as their welcome survey with the answers and those kind of things. The next thing we probably want to do is, once we have the data in here and we can review it for downstream processing, analysis, actual research, those sort of things, folks typically want to set up an export pipeline. So now that the data is available, there is export settings. You can go in and configure daily or weekly exports. And these exports, you can choose like which day they run, what time UTC. I believe that everything runs at midnight, but you can pick your offset for midnight. And then you can go through and choose the different data types. For, in our case, we'd probably want some of the Fitbit stuff, Fitbit activity logs, and maybe the resting heart rates. We'd also maybe want the Health Kit V2, which is the Apple Health Kit stuff, which would include everything we've pulled down from Apple Health. And once you have
and
those
maybe,
set up,
hey, Garrett, there's a question in the chat from Christy, which I think this is answering it. So she was asking, is MyDataHelps the cloud that ends up getting the Apple data? And so I guess, MyDataHelps is the broad term of this whole platform. But yes, the way that it works with Apple Health from the watch goes to the individual's phone, and then they give permission, and that data, just what they give permission to, will be shared. What would you say, Garrett? Via MyDataHelps, and then it is stored on MyDataHelps because they've given permission.
Right. Yeah. So both the Apple Watch and any other devices you have, if you have something, an app or some other device on an iPhone that shares data with Apple Health or publishes to it, it's a device side framework that things get published to on device. When we are prompting to share that on the device, the person is giving Apple Health permission to give us some portion of their data, the ones we've asked for, or some subset of those. And when they do, then the Apple Health will synchronize that data with us each time they open the app and stuff like that. And in the background, and there's certain circumstances when it tries to do it in background processing, but essentially when they grant permission to Apple Health to share data with us, we take it, it gets shipped from the phone to the MyDataHelps servers, where it's then available in here and for exports and for return of information within the app and those sort of things. And then, of course, the folks can go on their phone and tell it to stop sharing further data at any time they want. But as long as they have given Apple Health permission, it'll keep sending those data types to the platform, I guess you'd say. And so it is a a cloud on our side, but yes, it gets shared through the intermediary of Apple Health on the phone. Whereas Fitbit is, they have their data in the cloud. You basically link your Fitbit account to it, and then we pull some data from Fitbit into the MyDataHelps ecosystem as well, and then it's available alongside the Apple Health data and Garmin data and whatever other types of data you've given permission to those services to share. So in the exports, you would set up all the data types you want. You would set up your cadence for those, and then when you've saved this, these exports would run, and they show up in a place called Export History, which we don't have any right now because we haven't run any. There's also a feature called Export Explorer, which allows your exported data to go into like this database that you can query and run some analytics on within MyDataHelps Designer. If you're a licensed project, you can also set up automated SFTP or S3 Amazon bucket transfers. So instead of having to come here and find your exports and download them, you can actually have them automatically shipped to some process on an external SFTP or Amazon S3 bucket that can be configured. So
awesome. In less than 30 minutes, see?
Yeah, less than 30 minutes. We're already collecting data. So is there any questions?
Yeah, any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. We can answer questions. And then I also have some, even more advanced things that I can show and walk through if there aren't other questions. But if there are questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or in the Q&A. Either one works. I guess I'll go ahead and share. Thank you so much, Garrett.
Mm-hmm. I will, I'll unshare this here. If folks need to see something again, though, I'll leave it up so we can pull it back up and take a look.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. All right, so perfect. So, went through all of that. I'll just run through some advanced examples. I think, one of the awesome things about the platform is, everything Garrett showed, right? That's a no code, drag, drop, lots of choices, lots of different things you can do. But of course, individuals, researchers, and people can imagine lots of complex things, which is great. And those are possible too. Those then, typically there is some coding needed in that. But so always there's this info@careevolution.com. Feel free to reach out and ask, hey, I'm envisioning XYZ, and see, we can talk about how that works. Here, Garrett, actually, can you see, I think this may be how much data requests will cause people, you're saying this is for the patient. How, if you're asking for a ton of data, will people not want to approve? Honestly, it varies. So there certainly are some studies, they will ask for tons and tons. And there are, some people just, kind of select all and, just let it go. I don't know, Garrett, I don't have a specific data. And actually, we don't know purposefully what people say no to. We can obviously tell when things are shared or not. But, say someone said, nope, I'm not going to share cycle tracking. Or they said yes, but they didn't actually log any of it.
Yeah, so as a matter of privacy, we're allowed to say to the Apple Health, hey, please prompt them for this. It may or may not show them, depending on whether they've answered that question before. It doesn't want to bother them. We also don't know that they turned it on, other than, we can detect that some of that data showed up eventually. So we don't know if it's that they didn't have data or they chose not to share it. It's just a privacy thing. So we don't really have access to that kind of information. But I've been surprised, just as a practical thing or anecdotal thing, that people will tend to approve a lot. Like if they're willing to sign up for the study and you're like, hey, we'd like these 20 things or these 30 things, I think sometimes rather than click through each one, they just say allow all. If they are the type of people that are a little concerned about that, or maybe there's some portion of their data they might think is more sensitive than others, they can certainly go through and toggle those off. I haven't heard of situations yet where folks have specifically been like, wow, there's 50 things, I'm just not even going to deal with this or whatever. But I also think, I'm not sure we have a lot of studies that are asking for, 50 to 100 data types either. So I think usually the studies are a little more targeted than that than just a general. But I would say, you can always scale it back. So if there is a particular amounts of data that you want that you think would be useful, ask for it. If folks are not approving it or not wanting to do it, you can always reduce the number you're asking for or something. I think you don't want to lose useful data if it's something you really do think would be useful to you. But yeah, if you don't need to know, how far they pushed their wheelchair that day, then maybe don't ask that one, or how far they swam that day or something. Maybe it's not as relevant as the key things that you're trying to study. So
yeah, absolutely. And Michelle, I love your question. I realize I don't have an example. A question is, are there capabilities to trigger interventions with wearables, just-in-time adaptive interventions? There are absolutely examples of that, and using MyDataHelps, I don't have one. This one, is a little bit on that one. So that is something, there would be some custom work with that, but absolutely possible. I think such a great type of intervention. This one that I'm showing here is an example. So a study done at Michigan, so took adults who were seeking psychiatric services, but there was a really, really long wait. So then they did this multiple different arms, but one of them was enhanced personalized feedback. And so here they're able to use changes in wearable data, so such as daily step average count, in this case, going down, and then give a personalized message. Sometimes it's tough to get moving, or actually, sorry, this one is there, it's improving. So being proactive and encouraging them on that. You can see the app screen on the top right, showing this return of information, showing how they're doing on different things. And, they saw improvement in the PHQ-9 of that. And so, yeah, I can do, let's see, let me go backwards. This, I think, this is just a sort of general, what I think, gosh, so powerful. You can do this anomaly detection. Again, be thoughtful of what anomaly are you looking for, and then what do you want a patient to take? Is it a home test, say with COVID, or symptom logging, and then actually allows the patient to recognize that change, and then can do something, take action. Now it's not the data necessarily prompting. If it's, say, in that case of asthma, someone can follow their asthma action plan because they recognize that their control has changed. There's lots of different things of, okay, a digital data prompt, and then something to do from that. Another example from within Care Evolution is the symptom shark that allows people to log different symptoms. I was built initially for the MECSF community and long COVID, although it can be used across other things. But here there's the ability to get pacing alerts. So actually, if they're overdoing it, whether heart rate is elevated for a prolonged period of time, or steps are, approaching their kind of peak, that to actually encourage them to, okay, be careful and take it easy, opposite of what many other ones are, where you're trying to increase activity. And then just, I'd mentioned this asthma study a lot, or the asthma tool, a lot of this is prompting when there's a change. We looked at a bunch of different parameters. Nighttime heart rate was one of them, and respiratory rate. When there was a change, we used it as this engagement hook. So to bring someone into the experience, and then to complete their logging, are they having symptoms? If they're having symptoms, what are their triggers? And so it's, having that key point in time to have them pause and see how they're doing, and then their own self-discovery. It isn't telling them, oh, this is what's going on. It's just having them do that. And then this goes back to the socioeconomic and the, digital as a bridge. So the study that was performed, a 900 patient randomized control study, had both commercial and Medicaid patients, and actually found that in the Medicaid patients, there was a significant reduction in emergency room visits, 43%, and actually brought the rates down in the intervention group to match the commercial. So, something that was in this really simple, no human in the loop, we're given wearable and given this digital experience, which included education and these timely prompts, but was able to bring down those emergency room visits. Number needed to treat 4. Let's see, we do have just a few minutes. So, just a few things. When I think of anomaly detection, I think really important, you have to recognize it's non-specific. The data that you're getting from these wearables, back to the asthma example, we don't know that it's asthma causing that change. It could be, and these patients have asthma, could be something else. But in this, we had a question, if they got that prompt, that change, and they say, nope, I'm not having any symptoms. You ask them, what are other things that could be impacting, which actually is teaching them that, helping them to recognize, and also helping them understand that, hey, there are other things that could be doing it. Visualization, show, not tell. So you see that figure on the right, the, recent heart rate in purple, just kind of showing, oh, look, this is a change. It pops out to them. And it really is that key moment, that pause time for them. And then you can tailor the interaction, which could be, you know, through surveys, having them really reflect, get education intertwined in that. And this graph that was on the title page, that's my heart rate just from, you know, a day. And you can see the sleeping heart rate is very different. I think it is important. One, you can use the resting heart rates that come and are automatically calculated, or if you're using the overall heart rates, recognize sleep is different than awake. And so there's a lot of variation, especially if someone's using the wearable sometime while they're sleeping, sometimes not. And then we've also found that subtle changes in resting heart rate, as little as a 15% change, can be really meaningful. So we saw that a lot in the asthma and in other studies too. And so then this is just kind of my advice if you're thinking of wearable data as an engagement hook. You know, think about what condition is well suited. Well, there's got to be some sort of change. Like, for example, hyperlipidemia, you know, high cholesterol, that in a, you know, day-to-day or week-to-week thing, not expecting changes in that. Asthma, you know, as example, respiratory ones, cardiac ones, heart failure, you know, lots of things that you could see changes. Even something like blood pressure, you know, stress, which is a trigger and confounder, same with like caffeine, that can impact heart rate. So there may be things where you can measure stuff that is impacted by trigger. Blood pressure, also your medications may impact your heart rate. So actually when your heart rate goes up, it may be that they're missing medication. So that's a good time to prompt. Migraines are another great example. And then focus on what steps you'd want them to take after. Is it medication? Not medical advice. You probably don't want to go down, you know, that route. You know, that's a whole other ball game. And then again, these visualizations allow individuals to have self-discovery. Try to not tell them, try to give them the information so they can draw conclusions for themselves. And I think a lot more likely to make those changes because they're bought in. They're not just being told, oh, take your medication now. They see the connection. Oh, wow. When I stopped taking my medication, I started having more symptoms. So, all right, whirlwinds, you know, 1 hour, got to talk through all of this wearable information, got to see a demo of how simple it can be to really get this up and running. So thank you all for being here. There will be recordings sent out later. So, you know, things that we flew through and, you know, the pretty complex slides, you can take time to click on those links and go into it. And we're always happy to talk more or answer more questions. And I think that's it. We've gone through questions as we go. I'll put up the email as the last on here. So. All right. Thank you, everyone.